Hello there, welcome back to Imperator Rome Abridged, where in the previous part we went to our east and conquered a whole load of other factions. There was nothing they could do about that, but we did have a civil war thanks to all the destabilization that came as a result. Unfortunately for them, they revolted in the bit with the smaller number, so we just reconquered them, and that's all fine. Then I spent some time doing some building and going through one of these missions to improve your territory. There I am, just finishing it. With that done, we have 2 new missions available. We can do one to build up Arabia, or one to conquer some of Arabia. And it's conquest time really, so I started thinking about doing this one. The problem with this Matter of Arabia quest is that when it says Arabia, it's not really talking about the faction next to me, for example, or those guys over there, Makkah. It's Arabia in terms of the coast going up to the northwest towards Egypt, or in fact directly into Egypt, because Egypt has conquered all of that area. So to actually do these quests, we'll need to be at war with Egypt and conquer that area specifically, meaning it's not going to happen. And once you start a mission, you actually can't back out of it without losing stability. That wouldn't be the worst thing, but I didn't do it in this case because I didn't really care about the other mission either. What we're going to do is just do a straight up normal invasion of our neighbors, but on the way, there is some trouble. We get a really big barbarian invasion thing going on. I'm not sure if our neighbors stirred this up, but we end up facing like 15,000 troops. So we actually lose a couple of battles and have to give up some territory. Then we bring over the numbers and start reversing that situation. So soon the barbarians are defeated and we're back in action. It's just inconvenient because when the barbarians take one of your territories, I think they ruin it in some way. They take your population or reduce your civilization level, I think. Something bad happens anyway. Once that was dealt with, our troops could move right on over the border to just invade our neighbor. Again, they're not going to have the number to stop me. They've got 4,000 standing there. Well, they're going to die once I take the fort that's in front of them and am allowed to attack them. They've also got 4,000 behind me, but we can just send a load of stuff back to kill them. And really, that's that. Nothing to say about this war. We take another nice stretch of territory, with then a long uninhabited part off to the east that we can sort of not worry about. Someone mentioned you should always go with the final option in that choice that came up there, to go through the enemy's nobility and take a few of them on if they're good at things. I've always been either banishing or executing all of them, so we really don't have any foreign nobility at all. It's just the Merowites. With that sorted out, well, there are some more blobs nearby, and that's a crime, so we're going to have to take them down. Again, they will not be able to do anything to stop me, so we'll just attack. I feel like there should be some kind of surrender thing in the AI, where you can go up to a tiny faction and say, I have Casus Belli against you, will you just surrender instead of me attacking, and they automatically become a vassal or something like that. I believe as it stands, to make someone just agree to be your vassal, they have to really like you rather than be really scared of you. So we have to go in there and kill them. It's one of these wars that turns into 2 wars because they have a rebellion going on, so we need to be at war with the rebels separately as well. That's no problem, we've taken a little bit right there, and the rest will fall in due time. Also, because we're quite rich at this stage in the campaign, I don't even really need to send my own troops to do stuff like this. We could win this war by just buying some local mercenaries and doing it for us for a really hands-off approach. Well, our levies are there anyway, we capture the territory all fine, and that is that. We've now got this corner squared away. There's not much more we can do down there, unless we want to go up towards the Seleucids, which we don't. What we are going to do though is go towards Egypt instead. This will give us not only the option to do that Arabia thing, which I was still thinking about, but more importantly the option to go up the Nile and take some very heavily populated areas. Before that though, there are 2 factions that are buffering us from Egypt, the purple guys and the blue guys, so they are going to be next on the chopping block. We'll need to set up some Casus Bellis, but by the time our troops have walked there, since it's so far away, that will all be done, and we can start a war with them. Well, actually, things have changed by the time I arrive there. The blue faction I was going to declare war on has been replaced by a different blue faction that I'm now going to declare war on. This does actually make a difference though, because the original blue faction was allied to the purple faction. That meant I could easily declare war on both by only clicking on one button. I'd already set up to do both wars, so now what I'm going to have to do is declare war on both by clicking on several buttons, and well, that's just too much for me. Well, there we go, we do it anyway. This does mean we end up at war with what remains of the original blue faction, who just have this patch over here. We actually can't take that faction because they're not connected to us. There's a rule that you can't have any territory that's not joined to existing territory. So they're in the war, but we can not take their territory, unfortunately. Well, doesn't matter too much. Let's do it. I've got ships ready to help our invasion of the purple guys, and we'll go along the coast as well. As for the blue faction, well, they're already dead. They didn't have anything, so just had to take their territory, and that's that. I would disband my army here because I don't need it, but you're not allowed to disband armies while you're at war with someone else, so we have to just have them sit around wasting some money until the purple guys die as well, which just happens without consequence. They didn't have anything. And we also, in the peace deal, got a vassalization of that bit of territory that I wasn't allowed to capture. So we don't get it, but we get some of their money or something from now on. That's good enough. With this, we are done taking out the small factions around us. From here, we're going to have to come up with something to work against Egypt. So I started clicking through their diplomacy menu and trying to think about what we can do about them in general. They're going to have lots of troops, of course. Their allies aren't that good. They have one ally in Greece because they've taken Sparta, and they have Crete. So those two guys aren't going to be an immediate threat if a war starts. That's good. The bad situation would be like if they're allied to the Seleucids or something like that. One thing I might want to consider is allying to the Seleucids myself, but it's not really that easy. There are lots of restrictions on diplomacy in this game. Now I spotted I could do this support rebels thing. I don't think I did it right away, but I did click on that button eventually. This puts you in a state of perpetual support for any rebellions Egypt might go through. And the main thing to consider is that if they have a rebellion, you automatically join a war against Egypt. So we've got that rider in the background. Here's me wanting to get an alliance with the Seleucids, but they don't want to for a massive number of different reasons. If we could get that, we'd be guaranteed to win. Instead, I ended up getting allied with Cyrenaica. I paid some money to make them like me and grabbed an alliance. They'll still be able to help me out, if only with a distraction over there with a few troops or something like that. Now, while I was sitting around doing nothing, we get some potentially good news. In the ongoing text adventure, there is actually some drama which will help us when it comes to Egypt, because their faction leader has recently died and been replaced by a toddler, some 5-year-old. That's going to destabilize the realm as everyone else tries to rule through the kid. In particular, the kid's mother is now a pretender to the throne. That means we can potentially stir up trouble here and try to get a big rebellion going that we can exploit to steal some of their stuff without undergoing too much risk. After quite a long time clicking around, I found this menu. This was a heroic triumph of UI exploration. It's a menu that shows all of the nobles in another faction. So we can look at the Egyptian nobility and see who's disloyal, who's powerful, and maybe try to intervene, because you can interact with characters in other factions in the same way you can interact with those in your own. I just haven't done it at all so far. Now I noticed the first pretend on the list is very old and very ill. He didn't look too interesting. Then there's the current ruler's mother. The problem with her as a pretender is that her power rating is 0, that thing below her name. So while she might be disloyal, she can't do anything with that disloyalty. We can click on a button there to make her more disloyal by giving her some money, as it implies. But as mentioned, that doesn't really help us in this situation. We can though start doing some Crusader Kings 2 style intervention. We can take a look at the enemy faction leader, make him our rival, and when your leader is a rival to somebody, you can have them killed in certain situations. Here we can't do it because our leader doesn't know anyone who's close enough to the target to actually arrange it. So it says we have to be friends with somebody who's not in the target's close family. So I need to go back to my list and look through the nobles again and think, well, who might actually help me out in this plan? What I wanted to see was a combination of disloyalty and corruption, and really the main candidate is actually the kid's mother. The problem there is that that's going to be counting as close family, so we can't use them. Then my second choice was actually someone who I thought was pretty good at first, but upon closer inspection, this is the kid's grandmother. The question was then, is that close enough? Is it too close, I should say, to be close family in the game's classification? And therefore she won't want to kill the kid. If this was Crusader Kings 2, she would have no problem, of course, but here it turns out that is too close. Even though she's very disloyal, she doesn't want to kill her grandchild. A shame, she needs to become much more corrupt. Get some Crusader Kings 2 in ya. Well, instead, I just made friends with somebody else, and this somebody else was willing to do it, long story short, bringing us to this point when we can start arranging the deed. Interestingly, we have to sacrifice a member of our own noble court to be the fall guy in the scheme, so we're all going to pretend that this random fellow we've dug up was the plotter behind this scheme. He can then be executed later in return for us getting away with it. That sounds fine by me. There were some more stages where you had to pay some money and send troops and stuff to help out with the scheme, and it eventually succeeds. The kid is dead. No immediate result, but we can start poking around to see what this might do in the long run. He's been replaced by an even younger kid, and Egypt's stability is now below 1. That means they have an absolutely enormous debuff to their population's happiness. That's going to take their population happiness pretty much down to 0. With that, we can expect some trouble to arise for Egypt. What we're not going to see, interestingly, is a civil war. As noted there, they have no risk of civil war because everybody who holds power in the government is pretty loyal to this new baby they've managed to find to be the ruler. Well, that's fine for them. However, we can rely on the people now. The low happiness from the enemy's lack of stability will constantly be lowering the loyalty of their provinces. And actually, just as I was checking that very system out, there is a rebellion. That means the war has started right now because we technically join any rebellions due to that button I clicked earlier. So let's see what it is. This was a bit disappointing actually. I started looking around thinking, yes, where's this big rebellion that's going to save me from Egypt's main forces? Well, there's not very much of it. After poking around, it's essentially this tiny fragment right on the very edge. I guess the issue is you join the first thing to rebel and it's just this corner. If we'd waited longer, most likely more provinces would have rebelled due to that very low happiness. Instead, we're now in a war with somebody who's not really going to provide any distraction at all or deny the enemy many troops. And because the war started just suddenly, we're not in position, our troops aren't ready. Overall, I'm pretty sure this isn't any better than us just declaring war at our leisure at another time. Well, we've stepped in it now, so let's just see what we can do. It's time for a superpower war. One thing holding us back is that our second biggest levy over the Axumites is not available due to the governor of Punt being disloyal to me because he's so powerful and such. Inconvenient. There are some things we can try to do about that. In this case, I decided to leave him and just spend my vast piles of money instead, because we can get just as many troops by hiring one of the massive stacks of troops walking around the place to go and fight for us. So we do that, we raise some levies, and now we'll have to wait a while to get troops into position ready to fight this war. The main forces will be focusing on the Nile push, but there'll also be a side war in Arabia where we border them as well. There we're not going to have many troops, but maybe the enemy won't send many troops. There's our cheeky 2,000 levy from our barely populated desert tile we get thanks to some nice provincial system jank. They don't do very well though, because while I move them up to the front line, they quickly see 30,000 troops coming over that front line. Yes, Egypt are going to have a lot of troops, so us not being there with everything means they can easily break into our territory. They move forward and defeat my army pretty fast, and that's that. Curiously, they're going backwards though. That's because they're not going to try and capture my territory. They're actually swinging around to attack the mercenaries that I had coming over the border just to the east. I didn't notice this until it was already happening. I really need some kind of skirmish mode or something where you can tell an army, don't fight bigger numbers when you see them coming towards you. You can't give them that autonomy. So if you don't happen to be looking when an army comes out of the fog of war, You just won't know it's about to kill you, and that was a case where that happened. There'll be plenty more. We do have a similar number of troops available, so all hope is not lost. We may be able to chase those guys down and take them out. But I'm going to leave this part here, again due to lack of time to get footage. So part 4 will be our grand conflict with our bigger neighbours Egypt. Maybe something good will come of this.